Peter, can you explain the difference between lifespan and health span?
Most people, when they think about living to 120, they think about, sitting in a wheelchair drooling. And that's lifespan. Health span is how old are you and feeling great? How old are you and have the vitality, the cognition, the aesthetics, the mobility that perhaps you have today? Unfortunately, for most Americans who are making it to 80, they're healthy towards, till 65, and they have 15 years of degradation. And we don't want that. We want to be in vital health throughout the majority of our lives. There's species on this planet like the bowhead whale that can live to 200 years old, and the Greenland shark that can live to 500 years old. In fact, the Greenland shark can have babies at 200 years old. If they can live that long, why can't we? Right? And that's a really important question.
What does it take to do the impossible? What does it take to level up your game like never before? What does it take for individuals, organizations, for even institutions to achieve paradigm shifting? Nothing is ever the same again, breakthroughs.
Our mission is to decode the neurobiology of flow and cognitive peak performance. Access the minds of maverick scientists, groundbreaking innovators, and world-leading experts to understand what it takes to achieve ultimate human performance, so you can feel your best, perform your best, and accomplish your boldest goals. I'm your host, Rian Doris, and together with best-selling author Steven Kotler, I present to you Flow Research Collective Radio.
I am Dr. Tori Higgins. I'm the head coach at the Flow Research Collective, and I have the opportunity to moderate what's sure to be a phenomenal conversation between 11-time best-selling author, founder, executive director of the Flow Research Collective, and one of the world's leading experts in human performance, Steven Kotler. Steven, hi. How's it going today?
Hi, everybody.
We're also joined tonight by Peter Diamandis, who's a world-renowned entrepreneur, author, founder of various successful companies. Peter has started over 20 companies in the areas of longevity, space, venture capitalism, and education, including Fountain Life, Cellularity, and Vaccinity. He's also a best-selling author of 4 books, including Abundance, Bold, and The Future is Faster Than You Think, co-authored by our very own Steven Kotler. And Peter also holds degrees in molecular genetics and aerospace engineering from MIT and an MD from Harvard Medical School. His quote, "The best way to predict the future is to create it yourself," inspires people around the world to take on grand challenges. Peter, thanks for hanging out with us today.
Live long, as they would say on a longevity podcast.
Well put. So big welcome and thanks for joining us today for what's going to be a thought-provoking conversation on extending human health span. And today's event is extra special because not only is it a live crowdcast, but this discussion will also be featured as an episode on Peter's podcast, Moonshots and Mindsets. You should go ahead and subscribe now so you don't miss this one coming out. And our discussion is going to explore the fascinating interplay between mindset and health span, how the frontiers of longevity technologies and regenerative medicine are closer to home than we might think, and how this will shape the future of our healthcare system. We'll also touch on why these advances in research, science, and technology present an unparalleled opportunity for us to live longer and healthier lives. So the title of today's crowdcast is Extending Human Health Span. So to kick things off, Peter, can you explain the difference between lifespan and health span and maybe why our focus today is largely going to be on the latter?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I was at the Vatican holding this conference or the session on longevity, and I'm there with about 300 scientists, with members, cardinals, and extraordinary group. And I asked the question of the group, how many of you here would like to live to 120 or older? And like a third of the hands went up, and I'm like, what in the world? I mean, what am I not understanding? And the challenge is that most people, when they think about living to 120, they think about sitting in a wheelchair drooling. And that's lifespan. It's how old are you alive, and your brain is got some brain waves and your heart is ticking, but you may be not there and you may be in pain and suffering. Health span is how old are you and feeling great? How old are you and have the vitality, the cognition, the aesthetics, the mobility that perhaps you have today? And that's health span. For most centenarians, people getting to 100, centenarians typically will get to a 100-year lifespan and a 95-year health span. They're feeling great, and then they fall off a cliff. unfortunately, for most Americans who are making it to 80, they're healthy towards, till 65, and they have 15 years of degradation. And we don't want that. We want to be in vital health throughout the majority of our lives. And, Stephen, I don't know about you, but, I hope it's a lot more than 100 years old. There's a lot going on in the world out there I want to see.
Well, if you're sticking around, I'm sticking around.
All right, buddy. I love that.
Like, I feel like I just heard like a challenge accepted. I love it.
Between the two of us.
Last man standing.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So in both of your recent work, so you've really kind of urged people to rethink aging and how we look at it. So, Peter, in Life Force, you talk about how aging is a disease that correlates with every other disease. And this isn't really how many people think about aging. So what are the implications of framing it this way?
Yeah, there's a couple ways to frame this. So first of all, I think most of us listening here know somebody who's gotten to 100. 100 is now an expected life expectancy. Maybe not a health expectancy, but life expectancy. But there's species on this planet like the bowhead whale that can live to 200 years old, and the Greenland shark that can live to 500 years old. In fact, the Greenland shark can have babies at 200 years old. And
Dude,
so
did
if
you get some of that shark DNA?
I'm shooting for it.
I got some of that shark DNA. I'm styling.
So the question is, if they can live that long, why can't we? Right? And that's a really important question. So that's one way I frame it. It's either a hardware problem or a software problem. Another way that I frame it, Tori, is, when you're born, you get 3.2 billion letters from your mother and 3.2 billion letters from your father. It's your genome. And your genome doesn't change as you age. Your genome is the same at birth, at 20, at 40, at 80, at 100. So why don't you look like you did when you were 20, right? Why don't you have that six pack and, and ripped muscles? And it isn't what genes you have. To a large part, it's your epigenome. It's which genes are on and which genes are off. And what we're beginning to understand is that you can impact that. Steven talks about that in his extraordinary work. We've talked about it in Life Force. And it turns out, the number, Steven, you may know it, is either that your genes impact somewhere, I've heard as low as only 7% of the impact of your life expectancy, or as high as 30%. It's not the majority. It's your lifestyle. It's how you live, and which is what in our country is to a large degree about.
Yeah. Even that famous, I want to say it's the Swedish cardiology study where they track this. This was where all the blue zone work came from.
Sure.
They were looking at the genetic studies, right? And they're like, holy crap, genetics is only 10%. It was 10% was their number of the equation. So what's the 90% that is actually determining our health span, our longevity, the quality of our later years, all that stuff? That's where all that research started too.
Yeah, I'll put one last framing item, which I think is important to realize. We take for granted our lifespan and health span today. When we were evolving as hominids 100,000 years ago, if you look at when were humans cavemen and cavewomen, is about 100,000 years ago. The average life expectancy back then was late 20s. You would go into puberty age 13, you'd have a baby. By the time you were 26, 27, your baby was having a baby, you were a grandparent. And if our mission was to perpetuate the species, the last thing you wanted to do was steal food from your grandchildren's mouths. And so you would die. So for most of human history, the average human lifespan was 30. And it just the last century that everything from antibiotics and pasteurized milk and better sewage systems have given us additional health span. But I think it's this decade, and we can talk about that real breakthroughs in stem cells and epigenetic reprogramming, in cellulitic medicines could add 10, 20, 30 healthy years, and maybe buy you enough time to get the next 10, 20, 30 healthy years.
And I think, the way that we're reframing this, we've opened up the possibility space immensely, right? When it comes to extending lifespan and health span. So I want to take us back for a second. Steven, in our country, you tell the story of just this radical experiment in peak performance aging, teaching yourself to park ski at the age of 53. And this seems like an incredible feat that would have been unlikely just 20 years ago, right? Exactly.
And what is park skiing, Steven?
Park skiing is Park skiing is the discipline in skiing that involves doing tricks off jumps on rails, on wall rides, and boxes, And for those who are totally unfamiliar, theoretically, it's supposed to be incredibly difficult to learn if you're over 35. By the time you get to like 40, 45, it's moved down to downright impossible. And if you're in your 50s trying to learn park skiing, I think you're fucking crazy is probably the technical term that sort of gets applied to you.
Well, that would explain you.
Thank you, sir. Not much has changed on that front. But all that was then, right? All the reason in our country was possible, the reason I could write a book about it is, the discoveries that we've made over the past 20 years. The big one is all the skills we used to think declined over time. We now know they're use it or lose it skills. And this is all of our physical skills. This is all of our mental skills as well. And what's getting really cool is also how specific we are at getting, like how good we are at getting each of the various categories of things that used to wane, and how effective our tools are for training these things. So it's getting to be really, really interesting. That was apropos of nothing. Wasn't, I think, the answer to your question, but it is getting really, really interesting.
Well, that's exactly what I was leading into. So can you speak to some of the theories that have, that we're debunked, or you're debunking in our country, really, and how the landscape of aging research changed?
There's a bunch of different ones, but like we could just go through a handful of the physical skills. So it used to be for the past 20 years, didn't really matter what you thought you could train. VO2 max, which is your upper respiratory capacity, was this thing that it starts to decline at 25, at 50, it really starts to fall off. And it didn't matter what argument you made for peak performance aging. Physiologists would always be like, yeah, what about VO2 max? It's a goner. And right, like, and it was like this hammer that they would beat you with. And it turns out, then they went out and measured the VO2 max in octogenarian triathletes, and they found that, as a general rule, octogenarian triathletes, so you're in your 80s and you run triathlons, and you've got about 30 years of, you're not professional, this is just a hobby, but you got about 30 years of training, right? You started in your 50s, you kept going into your 80s. Most of them had the VO2 max of healthy 35-year-olds. The world record is now an 88-year-old man who's got the VO2 max, I believe, of a 24-year-old is what, like, and that's just, and we don't measure that often. So like saying this guy has the world record, it's not like we went out and did a wide study to find him. So that's just one example. I'll give you a weird one. So risk aversion increases over time, and you can fight against a lot of it, but part of it is tied to white matter density in the temporal parietal lobe. In this part of your brain, white matter is what wraps around, it's myelination, wraps around the neurons, the axons, and it's like insulation. So when myelination erodes and the white matter erodes, processing speed slows down.
Right. When
our brains start to process information more slowly, anything else, every risk aversion increases. We're a step behind. Right. And this there's a lot of ways to fight against this. But one of the interesting things that we're learning now is that there's a connection between bone health and white matter density. The bones are the mineral stores of the body, and all the calcium in the brain, which is what the brain uses to do anything, it's coming out of the bones. So they used to think, oh crap, white matter is declining. What do we do? Brain is. Now we are starting to know that if you keep up bone density, and there's a lot of ways you can do this, if you increase bone density, you can slow this natural risk aversion because you slow the attrition of the myelination. So like that's like 3 steps removed from what anybody used to think about. So Peter was talking about we're getting better at the epigenetics. That's like meta programming on our program. We're really starting to figure that out. A lot of stuff in the brain is working this way, where there's a distant connection that we're just starting to figure out and we're starting to solve for. And it's leading to really incredible breakthroughs over stuff that we didn't think we can preserve. So that's just 2 random examples. I'm pretty much, we can take whatever skill you want, and I can give you a parallel example.
One of the things, Steven, that I think about a lot, when I feel like I'm in my best shape I've ever been. I'm 61 now. And I measure it by my workouts and how many push-ups I can do and pull-ups, whatever the case might be. But for me, my number one objective, other than cognitive sharpness, is muscle. right, is maintaining muscle mass. And there is a direct correlation between muscle mass and longevity as a store of stem cells, blood supply, keeping yourself from falling and breaking. So
Peter, the number one correlation, I don't know if you know this or not, the number one correlation for longevity is thigh muscle mass. Thigh muscle inversely proportional to mortality. Like literally is. And it's part of it is exactly what you're talking about. It's part of it is also the bones, right? When you're building up thigh muscle, your leg muscle bones are the biggest bones in your body, right?
Exactly. Here's a stat that should scare the shit out of anybody. If you're over 65 and you break your hip or pelvis, you have a 70% chance of dying within a year. Oof. I mean, it's serious, right? And you end up in a hospital and you end up with a pneumonia, and it's a very quick spiral. And so really maintaining balance and muscle mass, if you're in your 70s, 80s, 90s, is one of the key correlates. But yeah, so I worship at the altar of muscle and sleep.
Those are not bad authors. By the way, Matt in the comments asked about grip strength, and grip strength is another indicator. It's not as directly correlated as leg mass, but a lot of these skills, like they have the numbers on like when grip strength starts to decline and when you're going to die. But it's not even just on the physical side. So there's correlations, openness to experience. This is a great one. In later adulthood, because risk aversion starts to increase if we don't fight against it, openness to experience starts to fall off a cliff. And there's a point at which where it gets down so small that they know within a year of you losing your openness to experience, cognitive decline shows up almost immediately. So it's not as fast as death, but you lose your openness to experience, and it leads to cognitive decline within a year.
Yeah, and if you're hanging off the edge of a bridge, grip strength directly correlates with life expectancy.
Very tight correlation there. Yeah.
You know what? You are totally right on that. I stand corrected.
It's amazing. Well, you've been dancing around risk aversion a little bit here. So let's dive into that. Can you speak a little bit more, Steven, about how the role risk aversion does play in aging and how we can intentionally push back against it to fully embrace the potential of these extended?
Yeah. So, I mean, what's cool. So you got to start at the beginning with this one, which is one of the new discoveries in the past 20 years about the sort of what happens as we age is there's cognitive changes in the brain, beneficial ones that start in our 50s. There's epigenetic alterations that start turning on certain genes. They're only activated by experience. The two halves of the brain start talking together, each other, and working together like never before. And the brain starts to recruit underutilized regions around in our 50s. As a result of this, you get access to whole new levels of intelligence, empathy, wisdom, and creativity. And I mean, really robust, really important developments. This is why the idea that you can't teach an old dog new tricks is actually totally wrong. It turns out old dogs, as Peter just sort of pointed out, are better at learning certain kinds of tricks than young dogs. But a lot of things in adult development and psychology, it's an if then. You have to do certain things to get these superpowers, and you have to do certain things to hang on to them. And to hang on to these intellectual benefits you get in their 50s and 60s and beyond, you have to train against physical fragility. Because as Peter has pointed out a bunch, what good is this supercharged mind if you lose the body and everything we've been talking about on that side? Second one is you have to train it up risk tolerance, right? And the reason is as we become more risk averse, fear levels increase. This is a problem for a bunch of reasons. One, we can talk about this in a second. There are 9 known major causes of aging, all of them tie to inflammation. Inflammation always ties to stress. So that's just sort of first and foremost is why risk aversion is a problem. But actually the fear, the norepinephrine that underpins that fear will block learning, block creativity, block empathy, block wisdom. So the fear we get from the risk aversion actually blocks all the very superpowers that come on in our 50s. And a lot of these powers, like Peter talks about being a better athlete now than ever before. The same is true for me at 55. A lot of that also comes down to things like expertise and wisdom and things you actually need cognition for. One of the reasons I believed in our country was going to be possible for me, meaning I could learn to park ski, was because of this added level of wisdom and empathy and, I was hoping for some emotional maturity that came along with the wisdom, which would maybe temper some of my, natural tendencies, things like that. A guy can hope, right?
I think part of it as well, pal, bringing it into something we talked about when we wrote Abundance, and we've continued in our other books, is the idea around the mindset and purpose-driven mindset here. If you're someone whose future is bigger than your past, right? You're more excited about the world ahead of you, and you're not lamenting what you've missed in the past, then you're in a mindset of wanting to be in great shape and wanting to have the physical capability to go and do whatever you want to do in life. And that, for me, is the foundational underpinning. It's jumping out of bed because you're excited about the day. You're excited about what you're working on. You have a purpose and a passion in life that is driving you to want to see the next 50 or 100 years. And I think that connects directly with the idea of being risk-philic, like being excited about your next job or your next adventure versus scared to change anything in your life.
I think there's two things I got to add to that because they're just so important. The first is, in general, Peter's describing is what is technically called positive mindset towards aging, right? My best days are ahead of me. This is one of the most well-established facts in peak performance aging, is that a positive mindset towards aging correlates to an extra 7.5 years of healthy longevity. So if you are morbidly obese and have a shitty mindset towards aging, it is more important that you change your mindset than you lose weight. If you're just going by the scientific numbers. The second thing I want to talk about, this is sort of a little bit, this isn't even peak performance aging. This is literally just healthy aging or adaptive aging or successful aging, whatever. So we talked a second ago about moderators in your 50s. You need train down physical fragility and train up risk tolerances in your 50s. By age 40, you need to basically have a way that you spend most of your time that in a way that generates passion, is in line with passion, purpose, and produces flow. Otherwise, you have real problems in your 50s and beyond. This is just standard adult development stuff. So if you really want to be successful, certainly anytime after 40, there's copious amounts of literature that say if you're not living in such a way to generate a lot of flow, live with passion, live with purpose, you're just going to have tremendous problems afterwards. Mindset would feed into that. But, purpose is a little separate from mindset in how its impact, right? But also what Peter's point is, if you have the right mindset and you got the right purpose and you're putting them together and really getting that feel, that's the secret, right? That's really, really what propels you.
So, and you both write extensively about having a massively transformative purpose, having clarity, knowing how your passions and your purpose intertwine. Steven, I love in Our Country, you write about chasing big dreams before it's too late to chase down those dreams, right? So can you both speak to what about the people that are listening to this who have maybe given up their dreams, right? Or they think that certain dreams are too audacious for the second half of their life. What are the recommendations on how they can approach maybe developing more clarity around that massively transformative purpose, really going there and then setting goals?
You want to go first?
Sure. No, Peter, go for it.
You, sir.
All right. So first of all, there is no dream that's too big. And I really want to, you don't have to actually do the entire thing yourself, but you can find the right people to partner with. So if you wanted to do something big and bold in days of old, to rhyme it out, you either had to be the king, the queen, the robber baron, in some way have enough wealth to go do that. Today, you can be anywhere on the planet and be part of a big, bold mission. You don't have to be the CEO. You don't have to be the financier or the owner, but you can be part of it at a minimum. The second thing that's going on is that we all have access to such extraordinary technology, right? We're living during the explosive birth of AI, generative AI. And what does that mean? It means that all of a sudden, within the next couple of years, it's not 10 years, 20 years, the next 2, 3, 4 years, we're going to have access to such extraordinary power that what is it you want to do? You're going to have the tools and the skills. What you need more than anything else is that passionate, driven mind to say, that's where I'm going. That, picking a target. and then reaching out, finding other people who want to go on that target with you, get access to all of the exponential tech resources that Steve and I wrote about in The Future is Faster Than You Think. So I don't think there's any dream too big. You can be part of a Mars mission if you want. You don't have to actually go to Mars, but you can be part of designing it, thinking about it, writing about it. So what is it you really want to do? The single most important thing is connecting to that childlike awe and excitement. It's an emotional connection. And if you've got that, then the rest is just putting the pieces together.
I love that. Steven, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts is Peter said it better than me. And the only thing I want to add,
but you would have written it better than me.
It's true. It's true. I got to take credit where I can get it. No, the only thing I want to add, and this is stuff that sort of covered a little bit in the Art of Impossible. And if you don't know what your passion is and what your purpose is, right? For the 5% of our listeners maybe who are still sort of floundering around, one, the passionrecipe.com, which is something that's free online that I put together for this, but passion is built out of curiosity. It's the intersection of multiple curiosities. That's how passion is built biologically. One curiosity is great, but it just doesn't have enough energy over the long haul. But if you can find a place where 3 or 4, 5 of your curiosities start to intersect and you play there with patience, and I want to emphasize the with patience, play there over time. This is where grows passion, and this is where purpose comes from. But the most important thing is you cannot be impatient with yourself. To really uncover your passion and your purpose, your brain has a built-in pattern recognition system. Your brain has to do this finding for you, right? It's your job to show up and explore and play at the intersection of these curiosities. It's your brain's job to figure it out. It will automatically figure it out. That's what pattern recognition systems do, right? But if you're put too much pressure on yourself, if you want to be there tomorrow, that's, I think, one of the problems when I see people who are hunting for their passion, hunting for their purpose, and they think it's going to show up overnight. They think it's going to feel totally different. Like they're going to wake up one day and, it's totally different inside. And these are slow builds, right? Yeah. I always say that, like, if I ask somebody for a description of passion on a basketball court, they're going to talk to me about Steph Curry or LeBron James whirling in for a windmill dunk. But the truth of the matter is that's mature passion. What passion looks like on the front end is just like a little kid in a driveway trying to get a basketball to fall through a hoop. That's what it looks like on the front end. We mistake mature passion, mature purpose, and what that looks like, or what we think it's going to look like and feel like in our own lives, for what it actually looks like on the front end. And it's a lot smaller on the front end, and it's something you nurture and you feed slowly over periods of time.
And by the way, that slow build also means it's got endurance, right? Doing anything significant in the world is not a quick hit. True moonshots, true massive transformative purposes are decadal long investments of your time. So it's got to be something that's going to be with you for a decade or more. It doesn't mean you can't change it, but something that you really, want to fuel you. And it can change over time. Steven, you and I have developed our passions and our MTPs over time. I'm sort of on my third right now, focused on the longevity space, and space as where you and I met was my earlier one. But these are things that it captures your shower time. You dream about it, and you build out of curiosity a body of knowledge and a level of expertise that makes you more and more fulfilled over time and brings people to you and attract a tribe around that. And it takes time.
One other thing I want to say, because there's a peak performance aging sort of message here that isn't often talked about, but there's a lot of data on this. In our country, my quest was to learn how to park ski, right? Because I had unfinished business in park skiing, and I wanted to impossible.
And what's next, Steven?
Well, my point in for peak performance aging is this kind of really seemingly difficult challenge is really important. One of the things that we know about older adults is they perform really, and older can be over 30 here, right? But they perform really well with long-term goals. Long-term missions actually feed Healthspan and longevity in really important ways. There's a bunch of neurobiology underneath it. There's a bunch of stuff I don't think we quite understand underneath it, because there's a lot of evidence here, and the evidence seems to outpace some of the science and some of what we've learned. But having these kinds of long-term missions in the second half of our lives, really crucial to thriving the second half of our lives. So like, you want to live with passion, purpose, and flow. But as Peter really pointed out, you want to turn that into a long-term mission or a series of them. It's going to help you thrive in your later years, however long you have left, right? And if Peter's right, some of you are going to live to be 400.
It's exciting.
Right.
Well, and Steven, I like how in our country, you do detail out kind of that goal stack that's really helpful in pursuit of your purpose. So having those mission level goals, then having hard goals and clear goals. Also strikes me that this is an opportunity, because I know people have just listened to you and are like, okay, but how do I do this in my life? And one of the vehicles that you talk about extensively in the book is through dynamic, deliberate play. It's a tremendous opportunity to systematically pursue your purpose. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I mean, dynamic is, I said that all of our skills are use it or lose it skills. Everything we used to think declined over time, right? So let's say you want to hold on to physical ability. That's what dynamic is. Dynamic is a single word that means strength, stamina, agility, flexibility, and balance. These are the 5 physical skills that need to be trained over time to really preserve physical functionality as long as we want. Saying all those 5 skills out loud, and it's a long list, so people call them that's dynamic. That's what dynamic means. One of the things that's really interesting about dynamic movement is also this is cool, when you pair like power and strength with coordination at the same time. Something about that, if you really want to hold on to cognitive function, what you want is neurogenesis, the birth of new neurons, synaptic plasticity. You want those new neurons to form new neural nets. And actually something that's not talked about nearly as much, angiogenesis, the birth of new vasculature to support those new neurons, right? Dynamic movement, when it's strength, when all these things are together, actually promotes neurogenesis and angiogenesis, which is no other kind of physical training does that, but dynamic movements do that. And so you're not just getting new neurons and they're forming new neural networks, you're getting the new blood vessels to support those neurons at a dynamic movement. Deliberate play is the opposite. We've heard about deliberate practice. You want to become an expert, deliberate practice, repetition with incremental advancement. And it turns out that's great for expertise, but in a very narrow range of subjects. If you're trying to become a classical violinist, or you're trying to become a world-class mathematician, there are certain things where the deliberate practice is going to work for you. But in general, deliberate play, which is literally translated as repetition without repetition, or repetition with improvisation. I'm doing the same thing I just did, but instead of trying to get it a little bit better, I'm just improvising, I'm freestyling. It's literally, on a certain level, play is just way more fun. We're less self-conscious. It amplifies learning. It amplifies motivation, amplifies progression. But from a peak performance aging standpoint, there's 7 or 8 auxiliary benefits to play that are really also important. So dynamic, deliberate play is an approach to your passion or we've been talking about mindset, passion, purpose. How does this stuff get unfolded in your life in a way that really works? Dynamic, deliberate play. And I think Peter and I will both agree, because we've done this together and we've done this individually. We've shepherded a lot of long-term projects that most people thought were impossible. They're very, very difficult into the world. We've seen them all the way through and watched the other and both of us have tried very hard to create playful environments around our crazy ass moonshots, because it's too fucking much work. If you're just heavy lifting all the time, you're miserable. You're never going to get there.
Let me add a couple of things here I think is really important. First of all, if you're going to take on a big ass moonshot, it's really important to do it with people you love. It's important to do it with people you care about. You're going to spend more time with your business partners and associates and band of crazy moonshot artists than you are your family. So you
Yeah,
better
but
really.
Lori, hold on, Peter. I'm interrupting you. Point of fact, Peter, what's your wife's nickname for me?
Yeah, you're my secret lover. Yeah, because during the times we were writing our books, I was spending more time with Steven at 5 a.m. in the morning and 6 a.m. in the morning. I would wake up with him every morning, and yeah, it's crazy. So listen, if you're doing something that is a big ass goal, it's a a true moonshot. Do it with people that you really love. If you don't like them, your moonshot's going to fall apart because you don't like spending time with these people as much. The second thing is we are emotional human beings, and Stephen can go into the neurochemistry even better than I can. I've given him an honorary MD and PhD, I think, over the years, but because the emotional energy is what's going to carry us through for a decade. Loving what you do or hating the existence of a wrong that you have to fix. Connecting with that emotional energy is what's going to fuel you. How do we motivate older adults to do repetitive exercises? It's making it fun. So again, it's who do they do the exercises with, right? So going out and exercising with a friend is a hell of a lot easier than doing it on your own, and making it fun where it's part of sports versus just part of, pumping iron. So it's the setting, who you're with, and ultimately it's having an emotional purpose for doing the exercise. Like, connecting with the fact that I want to live another 20 years to see my grandchildren getting married, whatever the case, having a purpose for that beyond just I got to do it, got to go make
And
the
other
donuts.
thing people forget when it comes to like exercise, Peter's totally right. You gotta, like, if you can bring in a training partner, if you can do something that makes it fun, you only have to keep that up until you start to realize how much benefit the exercise brings to your brain, like how much calmer you are, how much happier you are, how much better you feel, right? Because at a certain point, the drug known as exercise is gonna start functioning like the drug. I mean, it's an amazing drug, right? It's phenomenal. So all you got to do is get over the hump and into, the point that your habit machinery takes over. And that's 28 days to 3 months, depending what you're trying to onboard. So you're not saying I need a training partner for the rest of my life. You're saying I need somebody to walk into the room with me and help me set this habit up until I can take it on my own.
Stephen, let me ask you a question, because when I think about, the secrets of healthy aging or of health extension, one of the secrets for me, there are two parts here, is don't die from something stupid, right? We've talked about this, about really doing the full body checkups and so forth that we offer at Fountain Life, for example. The other is avoiding accidents, because a lot of the downside is the spiral that occurs when someone has an accident and is bedridden, and all the secondary and tertiary impacts of that. How do you think about that?
So I think about it in a bunch of different ways. A great question. So one, this is one of the reasons why leg strength is so important, right? One of the reasons of preserving leg strength is it preserves your balance, but two, like so I work with a woman named Eve House who does a movement system known as Revolution in Motion. And of all the things we train, proprioception and balance are the at the heart of it. And it's interesting because that's one of the things she's most known for, is this kind of training. I will tell you something really weird. This is just a random thing that I didn't even know was going to happen. But after a year of working with Edith, and we're working like in, on mats, on Bosu balls and exercises balls, like that kind of, but we're not in the wild. But I now, when I go into the ski mountains, I see lines like ways down the mountain that before I'd never seen. Before, I would look at the thing and I'd think, oh, I can't ski that. It's totally impossible. And it's not that my skiing has improved. My balance and proprioception has improved so much that I can look at the line and I know how my body is going to stay upright to do it. So my vision has changed as a result of balance and proprioception training. So people,
what are those? What does it look like?
I'll give you standing on a Bosu ball, which is that half shell ball,
sure. Yeah.
With 1 foot, with like a kettlebell in one hand, doing quarter squats on one leg, with different foot positions and doing different things with my eyes, stuff like that. is an example. But what I want to you derailed me. Where
Oh,
was I
sorry,
going?
buddy. You were getting
No,
about
it's all right. It's all right. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention on balancing, the other side of it is also the World Health Organization is really clear on this. They say that once you're over 65, you should be training balance, flexibility, and agility 3 times a week to prevent this, right? So they're really clear on like that there's a training schedule to prevent this. The other side of it is, and where people also sleep, is on the recovery side, right? When like one of the ways to preserve your balance is not let your muscles lock up, and so stretching and flexibility starts to really matter. Epsom salt baths, saunas, like what we're doing after we work out, so our muscles stay lithe and don't clamp down on us. That also really starts to matter.
Yeah, I totally get that.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of your rules in the book, right? Train like a pro, recover like a pro. So
Yeah.
I was dying to know.
And let me take it one step further, because I want to take it into something you know a bunch about, Peter, which is the cool thing about all these stats that we're talking about is we are getting much better at muscles, ligaments, and bones. We can't regrow cartilage yet. That I think is coming. Maybe we can. And
I'm not sure about that.
I haven't seen it. Well, I've seen stuff where we can increase bone density and regrow it that way. So I've seen it indirectly. But I also like where stem cells, exosomes, placental matrix, all the toolkits are. We're good with tendons and ligaments, muscles, and bone is what's next. So like a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, there's a window where this is like next 5 years, this stuff is killing you. And then that window is going to close because you may fall down and break a hip, but we're going to be able to regrow that hip in a way that's really sort of viable and interesting.
There's a bunch of work going on right now by 2 or 3 different approaches to regrow cartilage on your knees, right? And they have shown definitive increase in cartilage depth. And this is from Wnt pathway manipulations and senolytic medicines, right? Now, the problem is if you have a total knee replacement, you can't regrow it on the metal, right? It's so there's a window. I mean, I think in the next 5 years, we are going to regrow hair. We are going to regrow cartilage. We are going to be able to start, there's a few different approaches to solving both sarcopenia and osteopenia. In fact, one of my companies, Vaccinity, is looking.
You're going to have to define those words. That's the loss of bone density.
Yes, osteopenia is reduced bone density, and sarcopenia is reduced muscle. And sarcopenia sucks. It really is hard as you get older to build muscle mass, right? So I have like tripled my protein intake. I've tripled my workouts, using a number of supplements, and I'm just like pounding at that muscle, and it's just a number one priority for me. But there is a couple of approaches from stem cell derived medicines, and then another thing is a vaccine we're developing for space flight to stop muscle loss and bone loss, which could be used by octogenarians to stop muscle loss and bone loss, which would be amazing.
That is amazing. I didn't know that was going on. Yeah. So the Wnt pathway stuff is because I've been paying a lot of attention to it because it's all arthritis. Anytime there's arthritis, that's Wnt pathway stuff. And because I've broken my back, and most of the other places I've broken, I've healed completely. But I've got on one side of my back, I've got like lingering arthritis. I can most of the way, I've gotten most of the pain to go away, and I've rehealed most of the bone, but it's very slow over time. So I've been keeping my eye on some of those Wnt pathway stuff. We're supposed to see the knee stuff. Doesn't it get through phase 3 trials in the next year or two?
Yeah, it's really soon. It's really soon. And there's also, of course, stem cell work. It's still a little bit the Wild West, but it's this decade. It's not like 20 years from now, or 10 years from now. It's like next 5 years. I think we're really going to have some incredible breakthroughs. And the other thing that's going on is the whole AI of it all, right? Being able to really model this and understand this. So it's a good time to be alive. So stay alive.
Hang in there. Well, Steven, you experiment directly with some regenerative medicine in the book, and I like your standard that you look for stuff that works like ice. So, what'd you find out with this experiment?
It's a lot of what Peter and I have been talking about, and I think so. One, let me just point this out. Peter may disagree or agree with me. I think he may actually back me up on this. Most of the people who do regenerative medicine are functional medical doctors. And functional medical doctors are a ridiculously optimistic group of people as far as I'm concerned. And I find that they're a little, let's be nice and say, over exuberant about what they actually can fix and what they can't fix and what works and what doesn't. And what I've found in my experience with most of the functional medicine docs that I've worked with is tendons, ligaments, bone, even at the bones, like do I think we've got cures for COVID and like those kinds of things? No.
Are we talking about the same person?
But what I do think is that if you're healing tendons, ligaments, and bones, whether it's affordable medicine that you can now, like PRP. 2015, when I was using PRP, plasma, platelets enriched plasma, it was totally cutting edge, totally regenerative medicine. There were a handful of doctors who were doing it. It was $10,000 to $20,000. It was super whatever. And now my mother just had shoulder PRP injections in her shoulder, and her insurance covered it, right? And so like this stuff is getting mainstreamed really, really quickly. The cutting edge of PRP now is they are using massive quantities of your plasma. So it started out with small quantities of your plasma, and they got the new versions like this PRP massive dosing, and it seems to be doing really cool stuff as well. I just think that when it comes to when it comes to organ regeneration and things like that, we're not quite there yet. I mean, Peter and I could talk about all this stuff going on there, and some of it's really. It's a lot closer than you think it is for something that sounds like a total Star Trek technology, but we're not there yet. And so like when it comes to, Peter was talking about accidents and like don't die from something stupid, right? I think it's also important to sort of have an understanding of what we can fix and what we can't fix, right? And that's worthwhile. But like, in skiing and snowboarding, people are terrified about knee stuff, right? And as long as you don't totally blow out your knee, right, and need a total knee replacement, as Peter pointed out, because you can't grow stem cells on metal, pretty much everything is fixable at this point with exosomes, with placental matrix. It's still very expensive, right? And, if you want to try to heal something like a broken back, you could put a college education into your back. It will fix it, but it'll still cost you that much at this point. So like, some of it's financial. It's not just affordable for everybody at this point. Some of it is the tech isn't there, but some of it is it's advanced a ton. And most people don't actually realize how far it's come. And also, like, as I pointed out, like we're talking about these Wnt signaling pathway drugs for knee arthritis. This is this year, right? And there's a bunch of them. I think it's just 4 or 5 different drugs that are in development with different companies. So,